When I was younger, my dream was to run my own business, to be the master of my own destiny, to be able to set my own agenda and craft the rules of engagement in a way that aligned with my values and sense of self-worth. My business success would be my legacy. Everything would feel amazing, and I would finally know what it felt like to be safe, protected, and free. Spoiler alert, as if one's needed. I did the thing. I set up my own business, and instead of calm serenity, I've spent the bulk of the last 15 years hanging on by my fingertips for dear life.
Hi, it's Amanda here from Suddenly Autistic, and I'm recording this video on a Saturday here at our bush property. So this is our Buxcombe woodland out in Cowra, and I'm recording it here because I have a new job and it's located out here and it's amazing, and that's what I want this video to be about my autistic working life, about my life in general, I guess, because that's what this is kind of about. But I mean, who's interested in my life? Well, not even me half the time. Well, that's not true, of course I am, but I think knowing that I think it's important to share this. I feel like this is why I want to share, because this is about my journey of being autistic. This is the first time that I have applied for, been interviewed for, and turned up for a job where I have known who I am and I have explained that to other people and they still hired me. Yes! Anybody who knows me will know or be thinking, don't you have a company? Don't you already do a job? And yes, that's true. So I have had a consultancy business, a cosmetic chemistry consultancy, CCC, for many years now, 17 or plus years, and I am still going to be doing that. This job that I have been given the opportunity to do, started this week, done 2 days, fantastic, is a part-time position at the moment, could go to more days, potentially even full-time if the need is there, if the want is there, etc. So I have added this to my suite of jobs at a time, or my suite of responsibilities, I guess, at a time when I'm really tired, and also feeling very hopeful and positive about the future. So that's what I wanted to dig into. But first of all, I want to talk about just that little bit about the autism part, because I'm aware that in talking about autism and a lot of the content that I see online from people like me who are trying to spread the word about late diagnosed autism and what it feels like and what it's like and how we understand it. I think it's really important, and this is how I feel. For me, it's really important that in making these videos that you watching are seeing a whole person instead of a diagnosis. The diagnosis is really important to me, and it has helped me get to this point now where I'm feeling a lot more content, confident and grounded in myself, and at the same time less confident, if you like, in some ways. So I'm like confident and I'm less confident. How can that be? Well, I'm feeling more confident in who I am as a whole person, and I understand, I guess I could say, my vulnerabilities and where I have my blind spots.
I wasn't looking when my dream job popped up in my email inbox. In fact, I'm not even sure I recognised it as such when I opened and read the contents of that correspondence, but something in me, possibly the ADHD impulsivity, fired up and had me immediately act on what I'd just seen by calling the contact person, who I already knew, and asking them if they thought I was suitably qualified and therefore should apply. ADHD shows up this way for me, in unplanned, impulsive actions that run contrary to my own sensory needs, better judgment and value system. And it's not that leaning into my impulsivity typically brings rich rewards. There have been many occasions where I've jumped into something that's clearly not for me, and I've been outright rejected many times before. Sometimes it's because in just going for it, I'd forgotten to dot the I's and cross the T's on applications, submission forms, competition entries, and other such things. Other times I'd applied for the wrong thing entirely, missed the due date, or put myself forward for a job or a situation which I was convinced I could do, but which I really couldn't objectively prove in any way that convinces anyone else to give me a go. I don't even like the potential for a little nervous excitement, to be honest, so I'm often left feeling confused and a little discombobulated by myself, wondering if I really do know myself at all when I take these impulsive actions. However, on this occasion, I'd persist, because somewhere inside of me was an unshakable drive towards what was right for me, and this opportunity really did feel right. The job I am now doing has the title of Land Care Coordinator. I was telling this to one of my neurodivergent friends and buddies over coffee the other weekend, and they said, "Wow, that sounds like a complete nightmare," and I agreed. Not the land care bit, which is all about the environment, conservation projects, and deepening our appreciation for and connection to the land. We both actually agreed that would be a dream come true to work in that area. It was the coordination part, i.e. the actual job title, that both of us winced in pain at. Neither of us felt like we can coordinate a piss-up in a brewery, to be honest, but in reality, both of us definitely could, and have. The self-gaslighting force is strong and often overwhelming and self-defeating, but thankfully for me, it's not got the better of me this time. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation in which the abuser, in this case ourselves, attempts to sow self-doubt and confusion in their victim, also ourselves, minds, so we're literally abusing ourselves. Great. What we both recognised is that the word coordinator triggers two painful things in us. First, our very real neurobiological struggles with executive function, and second, the fact that this is a role that, by definition, will involve organising externalities, that being people and projects. Cue social relationship issues, an underlying component of autism, and a part of my business life where I've had my fair share of misunderstandings and struggles. But I went for and got this job. This is where the cognitive dissonance comes in. Cognitive dissonance is a state where two opposing thoughts, beliefs, or even realities exist at the same time in the same person, in this case, me. That I have real neurological difficulties in managing social dynamics and executive functions is true. And I got this job and have plenty of life experience-based evidence as proof that yes, I can actually do this. Cognitive dissonance creates friction inside of us that feels quite unbearable. On reflection, my whole time running my own business was an experiment in how far one can tolerate such state of affairs without snapping. Believe me, I pushed that line more than once. Typical ways the average person resolves cognitive dissonance are as follows. Number 1, change the behaviour to align to our values. In a business example, this could play out in a few ways. One common positive way may be for a business owner in that situation to seek and successfully complete some training to up their skills, or for them to hire people to fulfill the roles that they struggle with, thus reducing the friction and allowing the business to progress in a smoother fashion that's more closely aligned to the owner's values. A second way cognitive dissonance can be reduced is by a person changing how they think or frame their struggles to reduce the friction gap. An example of this may be where a business owner decides the stress of working at the level that they'd thought of to begin with isn't for them, so they reduce or revise their expectations and their targets and set them at a level where they feel they'll have more control. Maybe they opt for a 3 to 4 day working week instead of the 5 that they'd originally planned. Obviously, along with that has to come an acceptance that their potential income might be knocked, but that acceptance is worth it because there's a better work-life balance, and the work-life balance fits better with their conception of what they wanted out of having their own business. So the friction is reduced. This approach is sort of what I did, although it didn't really help in my business. Before I knew I was neurodivergent, and after trying and not succeeding with any behavioural adaptations I'd made, I decided to try gratitude and acceptance, focusing on the good parts of my business and telling myself that the struggles I had were understandable given the workload I was taking on, and that running a business is bound to be hard work. Post-diagnosis, I reframed this slightly, accepting that my deficits were potentially permanent, and so I should show myself more compassion and give myself more time to complete different tasks and then rest between the tasks. I also decided to schedule more days completely off, and I felt fine with the reduction in income and took steps to also screen clients a little bit further and take on slightly different things in my business that were more aligned to my interests and my desires. I used what I'd learned about my particular neurodiverse profile and felt that these steps should help to reduce the friction and ease my working life. While all of the above have worked to a point, the pain I felt in my business still remained, as none of these strategies actually challenged me to really question whether these new and improved narratives were serving me and helping me grow as a person and naturally progress or move through some of the frictions that I was feeling. The third strategy for managing cognitive dissonance is apparently very common, and that's to justify and rationalise their behaviour rather than change anything. This could quite easily become a situation where the truth is denied or a false reality or narrative is created. And in some cases, that denial and that false reality become believable even to the self, even and potentially to the exclusion of the objective reality, and even to the point where the delusion starts to pull other people in. An example of this may be where the business owner feels entitled to a particular salary and continues to pay themselves at that level while ignoring the fact they can't actually afford it, sustaining that illusion either by avoiding their accountant or by maybe holding off on paying bills and other responsibilities to artificially boost their cash flow. An important aspect of this approach is that the individual involved must gain peace from their behaviour, and so the behaviour is self-gratifying. They may even start to believe their delusions, and they may even deny that there is a delusion, thinking that this is real and that the fact that they actually have no money is completely bizarre, must be down to something external to them, not a decision that they've made. I acknowledge that it may appear to others that I was also rationalising my situation in what I was doing and framing it as changing my thinking, step 2 that I just mentioned, when it was actually delusional. But I actually disagree with that. While I did justify my stuckness on a day-to-day level, my life kept on being painful, kept hurting, so there was no gain for me. And in the fact that I kept feeling the friction precisely because I couldn't delude myself, I couldn't actually lose sight of the fact that I do experience the world differently, and that creates very real problems for me. And so it was more of a misconception or a misunderstanding of what to expect or what's normal or what's reasonable, rather than a deluded sense of reality or an alternative reality. If anything, my cognitive dissonance grew while I was trying to reframe my attachment to my self-concept and my business, and I ended up just burning out harder and faster than ever before. And in saying that, I still managed to keep my business running, and it's still successful, and it's a source of pride to me, a pride that has come at a price. I have noticed throughout my life that while I'm as prone to misconceptions as anyone else, delusions, be they good, i.e. fantasy and healthy romance, bad, sort of addictions and really false denying reality, or ugly, a superiority, a self-importance that actually becomes hurtful and even toxic to other people. These delusions are not easy for me to get into. They don't seem to comfort me. It's not something that sticks, and I find it really hard to let go of reality, which then actually causes me more problem and more dysfunction. So I tend to discard the delusion quicker than I can discard what I would call my hyper reality or my misinformed reality. I feel that this approach is more down to luck than judgment. Luck in the form of my autistically wired brain, A brain that's wired for data, reality, whatever that is. Truth, again, debatable, whatever that is. But for me, truth is a concept that's something that's testable and verifiable to a degree, or that makes sense to other people, to third parties, like in a judgment situation. So it's not completely delusional, and that other people would say, well, I think you've got that wrong. I'm really not that focused or motivated by what other people think or feel about me. So I also feel like my autonomy as an autistic person, the autonomic attachment process that I have, is self-protective, and basically I'm okay as long as most people leave me alone. And of course, in a business, people don't leave you alone. That's not really the point, is it? So with all that in mind, a business owner who's struggling but using this method to minimise their cognitive dissonance may end up with their business failing because they refuse to address anything that can contrast from their dream version of reality. They might avoid paying taxes or constantly argue with clients that they don't treat them as they wish, without any real openness to them resolving collaboratively anything that's going on. And that certainly isn't something that I resonate with. I have had good relationships with my clients. They've often just been very difficult for me. So they are good in terms of the objective reality, but they feel difficult for me because of just how I experience that kind of thing. My reflections around autism and cognitive dissonance and the role of trauma and anxiety. The company I set up 15 years ago was and still is a success, in as much as the bills are paid, the clients keep coming, and the work keeps getting done. My cognitive dissonance is around how I thought being in that situation would feel versus how it actually feels, and how I thought I was experienced that kind of work versus how I actually experience it. Even in a business I set up and established the rules and systems for, my everyday working life is tricky. Why is that? Well, it's precisely because of me. I am the problem, and that is the last piece of this puzzle for me. Integrity is the opposite to denial, and integrity is an honesty, having a whole and a strong values system. My autistic thought patterns plus my trauma, that's the CPTSD and the generalised anxiety disorder, GAD, come together in my business, or came together in my business, and created the perfect storm for internal friction, pain and suffering. It's only through going for and starting a job that exists outside of business bubble me that I can truly see that it was my own blind spots and lack of perspective that trapped me most, and that leaning into and accepting my vulnerabilities is where I'll find answers, personal growth, and ultimately success and peace. So what do I mean by this? After working 2 days already, I can see that while this new job will be demanding on my executive function and social skills, those are facts, I'm not scared, anxious or avoidant of demanding tasks. I don't mind a challenge, and in fact, I find more cognitively demanding tasks keep my ADHD impulsivity at bay, as they require more focus and attention. Plus, I'm also medicated now, and that always helps. In my business, I was coping with executive function and relational issues alone, and frequently felt isolated and abandoned in my struggles and my reality. Finding out my cognitive issues had some basis in my neurodiverse brain helped me come to terms with my reality and understand what I'd need to consider in order to set more realistic goals for myself and keep myself safe. It also helped me understand why the typical business supports, hacks and strategies tended to feel invalidating and triggering to me. What my diagnosis didn't do is bring me any closer to getting me out of my own way, and that's why the pain persisted. Contrasting that with my new job, I see this role inside a framework and a team. A framework and structure that was not created by me, and that is important. This new job, my job, is fairly flexible in how and where it's conducted, and that will give me the time and space and conditions necessary for me to make my own adjustments so that I can work to my capacity. Unlike my own business, this job is not the whole business. It's merely a part, a cog in the wheel, so to speak. Therefore, the trauma and anxiety I felt in my own business around things like financial and legal vulnerability are far less pressing and relevant. I will be supported. I will have people to bounce ideas off. I will be working in collaboration with other invested and dedicated people. I started to realise that much of my everyday stuckness was a symptom of this. closed, self-feeding, defeating loop that I got myself in. And that while it certainly wasn't all bad, and definitely wasn't a completely dysfunctional mess, it wasn't going to get any better unless I could find a way to change myself. Seeing myself in this new role, looking with fresh eyes. I took some time today to work through my value cards in relation to this new job and help me form a new perspective on both myself as an individual in this role and myself in relation to others, and in relation to the entity, Landcare. Doing that has helped, as one of the core trauma traits I'm still trying to shake off is that of hyper-independence and hyper-responsibility. I've literally put myself into situations where I am on my own and I do have to take responsibility for everything. But doing that was more habit than conscious choice, and now I know better. The only way I can grow is to do better and make this change. Self-acceptance and accepting my own delusion. As I said in the beginning, making content like this helps me, and that's one of the reasons I do it. True to form, it was in preparing this piece that I recognised a large delusion I've been holding on to. The delusion that someone would come and save me. Oh, I can't believe it. That's so not me. That's another delusion. I've always conceptualised myself as someone who doesn't shy away from their flaws. In fact, I've often highlighted them up front. However, I now see that this is my attempt at deluding myself. I'd adopted a strategy of self-protection that involved me pointing out my deficits ahead of time, both to control the disappointment I anticipated others would experience after being with me for a while, and also to let out a cry for help in as subtle way as I could muster, without being disingenuous. Disingenuous is pretending that one knows less about something than one really does. This delusion has definitely been strengthened by my past trauma and rejection, but it's also been fed by my neurodiversity and the way that these two things, trauma and neurodiversity, intersect in a world that's not designed to accommodate us. Intellectually, while I'm classed as gifted in some areas, my capacity is lumpy and unpredictable. Some days I can barely walk through a space without tripping over my own 2 feet, and I also struggle to write a couple of sentences without error. But on other days I come across as a complete genius. I've often been misread in my down moments as careless, arrogant, uninterested and aloof, when actually I was on the verge of being overwhelmed, burnt out or shut down. The level of invalidation and the punishment, natural consequences, that follow included social rejection, blame and attempts at shaming, and those have caused much of my day-to-day dysfunctionality in recent times, mostly because they confuse me. What has now become clear is that while I can't change the world, I can change what I expect from it. While preparing myself for this new job, I've been forcing myself to question really deeply what is it that I could change and how could I do things differently. And I really do feel that accepting myself and the consequences of being me in real time, i.e. just being, just living in the moment, not wasting energy trying to preempt, read ahead or save anybody from myself, is the missing piece. Yes, this job will test me, but I've been tested before and I have proved that I can do all of the things that this job requires of me. I believe I can do it, and I also believe that in finally letting go of my concept of what being a boss lady should feel like, I will actually be more likely to achieve the state of blissful flow and fulfillment that has so far eluded me. I had unconsciously used my autism diagnosis to strengthen my conception that I function best on my own. This is both true and a lie. In short, it depends on the context. And in the world of work, I can now see that isolating myself like I had been doing was not only unhealthy for me, it was deepening my dysfunctionality by pushing me more and more into self-reliance. I've already admitted that relying on myself is a complete nightmare. Oh, the absurdity. My ADHD diagnosis has not necessarily felt like an excuse for my executive processing difficulties, but it has made it hard for me to get motivated to reframe my skill set and see all the ways in which I can do cognitively demanding planning tasks well once I have enough time, support and resources. My new job presents me with an opportunity to test my real capacity in a supportive team environment on a task-by-task, day-by-day way that can be validated and checked by someone other than me. I now know how vital that is. My trauma and anxiety have left me very tired, worn out in fact, often defeated and at times fearful of taking on anything new. Living in such a heightened state of awareness of one's own vulnerability, while remaining somewhat clueless of how to find safer ground, has left me feeling at my wits' end, exhausted, burnt out, and completely overwhelmed by my own predicament. I now see this change could be as good as a rest, as they say, in helping me reset my goals and recharge my batteries, so I can literally work my way through it. So that's it. 10 days before I turn 49, and 2 and a bit years after receiving my diagnosis and my trauma diagnosis and the anxiety, I have landed myself both my dream job and a job that requires me to lean into my pain points and really test my social and executive functioning capacity. My cognitive dissonance is high. I both know I can do this and am surrounded by evidence and data reminding me of just how hard these things are for me, and also data reminding me that I have done it before. The difference this time is that I now know that I'm not doing this alone. I know that I didn't make the structure and the framework into which my job fits, and I know that I actually can do all of these things and more, if I finally, once and for all, accept myself for who I actually am, rather than for who I think I should be. Self-acceptance is the gift I've given myself this birthday month. I know who I am, and I accept that I can grow from here. While I'm mindful that my tendency towards hyper-independence and autonomous functioning is somewhat necessary and protective, given my neurobiology, trauma history, and natural introversion, I've also realised its potential to become self-defeating, and it's now time to challenge these aspects of my being. Much to my bemusement, in the past, people have seen me as an A-type go-getter rather than the hot mess dichotomy of village idiot come insightful genius I feel I really am. I can't lie, receiving my diagnosis 2 years ago did feel like I'd finally been seen for who I am and granted the opportunity to give a big F you, see, I was right and you've all been abusing me, two-fingered salute to the world. I now see that I'd been holding on to a lot of anger and a desire to have the world shift a little, become a little more compassionate and interested in me, the real me, when in reality, the world remained indifferent to my plight. It's only now, in writing this, that I see how beautiful that indifference is, what I can learn from that, and how I can heal from this dissonance with integrity is what gives me hope. I really look forward to the future, and I'm excited to see how my new job and how my old job feels now that I've gotten all of that out of my system. Thanks for listening, and best of luck with your autistic or neurodivergent working life.